Cha-cha.
A Packland party and I wasn't invited?
It's about time you showed up with...
Started, because we were already starting. We were in the middle of a conversation when I cut us off, Peter Cohen. Peter Cohen of peter-cohen.com, and that's a hyphen in the middle. By the way, it's not Peter-Cohen, all one word. That would be insane. Also, Flarg, Flargh on Twitter, Flargh on Twitter.
Peter-Cohen.
Yeah, exactly.
Nickname or something, I don't know.
But you put quotes around it, but then the URL is Peter, quote, dash, end quote, Cohen. It gets a little unwieldy. So yesterday we started talking about the one more event thing, and you brought up some stuff that I wanted to carry over into today, and then there was also a question that I said we would talk about yesterday that we didn't, so we'll go ahead and continue. Why don't we start where I probably should have started yesterday, or thought I would wrap up yesterday or something. I'm not going to, though, because I want to go with the other thing really quickly. You talked about the fact that some people have been around from the 68K to PowerPC transition. Were you one of those people?
Yes, I am a graybeard.
Okay. At the time, so when are you talking about then? Because I don't remember when that happened. I was actually there for the announcement that they were going to Intel, but I was not conscious even of Apple still being a thing at the time when they went from 68K to PowerPC. When was that?
68K to PowerPC. Let's see. That would have been the very early 90s.
Okay. Was there concern? Was there consternation? Or was the whole thing so new at that point that people were like, oh, okay, let's see which direction this goes?
Let's see. That would have been the late 90s. Because I think Mac OS 8 was sort of the Mac OS 10 sort of threshold there.
Okay.
So it would have been like, yeah, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm sort of like I'm memory tripping here, but you ask a very good question, and the reason why I want to unpack this a little bit is because the 68K to PowerPC transition and the PowerPC to Intel transition has always come or has come with a sort of what's the word I want to use? It's a sea change, right?
Yeah.
It always shakes up developers. Developers always fall. There's always developer attrition where developers just say, "Oh, screw it, no, not going to support this platform anymore." You're good. You have some big vendors, sort of die off or their stuff withers, and then there's like this new crop of developers that comes up. And it's just really kind of interesting because it's happened over and over again in Apple's evolution of the Macintosh. In a weird way, because it really hasn't happened with any of Apple's other products. It's just been this Mac that has gone through this Promethean change over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. Apple made that change in the 90s.
Well, I mean, and that's the question I have. What was the reaction in the 90s? Because I remember the reaction in the move to Intel, it seemed to me anyway, generally speaking, excitement. Now, I do also remember I was sitting at, what was the name of that place? I was sitting at some restaurant in San Francisco that was relatively near WWDC, and I heard some developer kind of freaking out on the phone to a friend of his, Mason Street Cafe, or Cafe Mason or whatever. And he was freaking out to a friend of his about all the changes that it was making and all the changes they were going to have to do. But he was thinking in terms of one guy. I think generally speaking, consumers were actually cool with it because we all knew Intel and we all knew that Intel processors were upgraded more regularly than PowerPC. What was was there a general reaction to the move to PowerPC from 68K? Or, do you not worry about general reaction when you're talking about roughly 10 people at that point?
Well, no, because it was Apple's entire product base, right?
Right.
Apple wasn't selling iPhones and iPads and watches at the time. It was just selling Mac. So, you ran the risk every time you did this of killing the goose that laid the golden egg. I think with PowerPC, 68K to PowerPC, the idea was to make it as smooth a transition as possible. It's interesting because PowerPC was touted as being so much more efficient and so much faster. But we didn't see that. We didn't see that iteratively with the first Power Macintoshes. We didn't really see that. it took a long time for that to unfold. And the reason why is because Apple, at the time, if I remember correctly, was so focused on creating a sort of just a continuous user experience that there was a lot of stuff that got bogged down in emulation, in running parallel instruction sets between 68K and PowerPC. So a lot of the inherent efficiencies of the platform weren't manifest on day one. It was just kind of an iterative process for consumers. Where the company ran into trouble was in developer tools, because developer tools were very heavily optimized for 68K binaries and for working in that kind of environment. And a lot of stuff broke really hard when PowerPC stuff came out. So that created a huge problem that took a while to backfill. The PowerPC transition, or the Intel transition, was interesting because what I think a lot of people, maybe outside of Cupertino, didn't really fully understand at the time was that next step, the development of the next operating system upon which OS X was based, instilled in that whole engineering team within Apple, a certain sort of iterative perspective on making sure that their technology was portable on different hardware platforms. So OS X had been running on Intel hardware from day one, right? Because NextStep was running on Intel hardware from day one, right? This Next Step at the time was platform independent. There was a Next Cube, but by the end of Next's run, it had made its operating system and its technology portable to a lot of different to a lot of different hardware platforms. So Apple had a big leg up when it came to OS X as far as that's concerned, and being able to bring developers along for the ride. We've got a lot of concerns, obviously, with how some of the niceties that we've come to expect with Intel hardware, like being able to easily emulate Windows or run a virtualized Windows environment, I should say. That it's going to be very interesting to see how that stuff works. But fortunately, those developers haven't been left out in the dark either. So I'm really excited about what's coming.
Let me, because we started yesterday talking specifically about the One More Thing event, and there was a question that I teased yesterday that we didn't get to. What about using that term, one more thing? Because there have been basically two schools of thought around it. I mean, it's been, 24 hours, again, as we record. I think VentureBeat and a couple of other people have said, this is the one more thing. The one more thing is that Mac. This is basically Apple has taken their fall events and divided them up into three, where they would normally have one or two. And so this is the end of that one event. This is the one more thing. There are other people. iMore was the one that I read. And also, I will say there's a tiny bit of this in me as well. That term was always, sort of here's the surprise. Here's the thing you didn't see coming, even though, as I pointed out on Mac OS X, we often did see it coming. The last time I remember Tim Cook using that term was when he introduced Apple Watch. We knew there was a wearable coming that day. We didn't know what it was going to be called. We didn't know exactly what it would do, but we knew that there was a wearable coming. And yet still there was a bit of surprise when he said the words, not that he used them, but when he said the words, one more thing. I was gobsmacked is a little strong, stunned is a little strong, but really surprised to see them send out an invitation that said one more thing across the top. Is it really just going to be the Mac? Is it setting up unrealistic expectations? Does nobody in fact care at this point? Even though I think Tim Cook very much cares about those three words because they were uttered by Jobs. What do you make of the marketing? Well,
I think that I forget which industry wag first identified it as such, but I think Kremlinology is a fun hobby to break out every time Apple sends an invitation to one of its events, real or virtual.
Really quickly, I call it zaprudering.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's look, we love to attach patterns and meaning to things because that's how our brains matrix information. And terrific. Look, it's either going to be the Mac or it's going to be what AirTags or whatever the hell they're called this week.
Yeah, I know.
Or what, a new set of AirPods Pro. I don't friggin' care. Just I will say this.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate Apple using that phrase because it's very loaded. It's a Jobsism, and I think that Apple really needs to keep that.
That's powder you want to keep dry, and that's the only thing that has me wondering about it, honestly. Now I will tell you, here's me drifting off to sleep. Okay. They're doing a one more thing, and I know it's going to be the Mac. And then in that little place, between I'm fully awake and I'm completely unconscious, we get something aspirational at the end of this show. And I don't mean we get a new device that we're going to be able to go out and buy in January, but, maybe for the first time ever, Apple sort of indicates a direction in a way. We get an idea of where we're headed. As far as, people who watch and follow Apple. And then I fall asleep and suddenly I got 3 arms and I'm dreaming about that talking cat again. That thing. Am I right?